Welcome, everyone. We're trying something new, and I wanted to have this conversation. So, for those of you, welcome, welcome. So, the conversation that I wanted to have, I am all about, the podcast itself is called Emotionally Uncomfortable. And the reason why it's called Emotionally Uncomfortable is not necessarily just about emotional intelligence or feeling your feelings all the time. It's, I believe, in my own personal journey, is that leaning into the life you want to be living, how you want to feel, having that vision, knowing what you want to go after is incredibly emotionally uncomfortable. But when you kind of understand the flow of that and how you lean in and you step up and into your next level vision, this is where the magic happens. But when I'm working with women and they tell me they know what they want, they know what they need to do, you're listening to the podcast, you're buying the books, you're invested in things, there's something that happens on the brink of a breakthrough. And this is where like my sweet spot is, because I truly believe that the decisions you make when you are about to have that breakthrough, look at Bryan's side eye to me, when you are about to have that breakthrough, that is where the magic happens. And marriage and partnership are one of those areas that start to kick up emotional discomfort, or things get a little chaotic when you are about to have a breakthrough. There's like these little invisible like energy tweaks that happen. And so I wanted to have this conversation today. I'm probably going to continue to do this with different areas or different buckets. So please give me all the things that you want to talk about. You can send it to me privately on Instagram. It's just my name. You can post it in the chat here. You can reply to an email of like, what other live conversations do you want me to have? Whether they're solo with myself, whether I'm bringing somebody else on, like in my world, not necessarily an interview. I am open to all of it, because I think when we're pulling back the curtains behind the scenes, this is where the bullshit is like stripped away, where we can have honest conversations, where it's not like, what's your system? What's your strategy? Today, I wanted to talk about marriage and partnership. Bryan and I have been together for, I'm going to say almost 20 years.
Almost 20.
So we're not going to spend an hour going into our story and all the things. I've talked about it a little bit openly, like on the podcast over the years, but marriage and partnership is not necessarily one area that I've dove into. And I'm just going to be honest as to why. It is not an area that I have typically struggled in, or we have struggled in. And I will tell you most likely the reason why that is, and Bryan can attest to this, is because I probably lean towards the side of hyper independence.
I thought you were going to say because I'm awesome.
Well, that too. But I lean towards the side of hyper independence, and I refuse to lose myself in a relationship. And I think because of that itself and that core strong identity and that anchor and that boundary that I hold with myself, that has actually improved our relationship, because that's a standard and a boundary that I've held for myself. So I'm just going to give you the microphone for a second of like opinion about that. And then I want to start answering your questions. So start posting your questions in the chat below. I have questions here that I get a lot from you guys. So post them in the chat and we'll go from there.
No, I think that's true. Not having to rely on the other person to having your own sense of self is extremely important, but not having to piggyback and do absolutely everything together. Those of you that know us know that we often travel apart. We don't necessarily need to be together 24/7. And when we are together, oftentimes we're not really talking all that much. Sometimes just being in presence of the other person is all we really need. but definitely Heather does not like to, well, how can I say this diplomatically?
Just
She is
say it.
very strong-willed, and typically if Heather wants to do something, she's going to find a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's within reason, I think, too.
Okay. I was just doing some tech stuff behind the scenes. So let's start digging in regarding questions. How many of you struggle with communication in partnerships? Just post in the chat. Just put like me, or what is your feeling around challenges? Okay. Or communication, depending on the topic. Yes, me lately. Great. What is it about communication that is difficult for you? What is it about communication that is difficult for you? I want to hear from a few of you. So just post me always wanting to be right, calling myself out. Okay. So facing yourself, right? Like having to face the truth, be honest with yourself. So the reason why I say this is because this is the number getting my spouse to communicate back. We need to talk about that. So this is the number one thing, the number one challenge that I get from people is communication. Communication being so difficult with their partner. And there's multiple reasons for this. Number one is our lives are so full. We as a culture are addicted to busy. Addicted to busy. I talk a lot about this in, my energetic time management framework of like you have to manage energy, not time. When we live in a culture in a family unit that is addicted to busy, what happens is we don't have any space or capacity to connect and communicate. So when we do start to communicate, it's from a place of reaction and not being proactive. So ask yourself that question right now. Are you living in a proactive state or a reactive state? Most of the time, you're probably living in a very reactive state. Like you just feel like you're constantly putting out fires. So your behaviors have to start being proactive instead of reactive. And that requires emotionally uncomfortable conversations. I'm willing to own my shit, admit when I'm wrong, etc. However, my partner isn't like that, goes on the defensive. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about this. Um, let's talk about walking on eggshells around your partner. And I was talking to Bryan this morning about this, that partnership can mean anything. It doesn't need to be a man or a woman, and it doesn't need to be in an intimate partnership. It could be in a business partnership. It could be in any relationship. So we're just obviously talking from our own personal experience, but this is such a common thing of, let's say I want to talk about something and then you become defensive or reactive. So maybe like, can we go into the male brain of like, why are they doing that? And how can you approach it a little bit differently?
Timing. Timing's a big one. Specifically with me, if I'm in the middle of something or if I'm not really prepared to have this conversation, if my mind's on something else, I think that a lot of the times I get backed into a corner quickly and I put my claws up quickly. I think that finding the best time to have the conversation for both people so that you can approach it in a open mindset is very, very important.
Okay, so talk about timing because sometimes people will be like, there's never a good time. Like he's always reactive or they're always reactive.
Well, I feel like I'm gonna bring up a hypothetical. For example, if whether it's a man video gaming or you come downstairs and you see man video gaming, kids are in bed or whatever, and you say, well, you're always on the damn video games or whatever it is, you're triggered, you want to have this conversation. Bringing it up at that time is not the best time because the person, me, is going to get
Mm-hmm.
really, really backed into a corner quickly. First of all, I'm focused on something. My mind is very one track. I can't go in eight different directions like you guys can. I'm very, very one way
Yeah.
thinking.
Okay. We talked about this a lot. So we have three boys. They're 20, 15, and 12. I am surrounded by mass well, it's not masculine or, I mean, you can call it masculine, testosterone, male brain
Male brain.
energy. And my brain, I operate at a very different level. So the female brain, like the biological female brain, is wired to multitask.
I imagine your brain like a jellyfish. You've got like a million little tentacles dangling down, and me, I'm like
That's
Pac-Man, just one whoop, whoop, whoop. That's it. Like,
very narrow focus. Yes,
yeah.
specific. Yin and yang, right? So there's two sides to that coin. There's the strength and there's the shadow. So I could tend to burn out because I'm going to overdo. I'm going to overdo. I'm in one task. Mentally, I'm already on to the next task. Where you're focused, you call it monotasking. You're focused on one task and you're like, we're not having that next level conversation because I am focused on this task. Understanding that alone was a huge shift because I'm surrounded by all these monotaskers, right? But there was also something inside of me where I just decided not to accept that I had to accept my area of genius and my desire to grow, evolve, or change and not give that up. But I also had to figure out how to co-create with you in the sense of like I want to talk about our Monday meetings as an example because I feel like when I first introduced this, you were a little
It was awful.
defensive.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this as an example. So, a lot of times when I am having conversations with clients or colleagues and they're like, "How do you guys like stay on the same page?" I'm like, "Sometimes we're not on the same page." But one thing that I have noticed, and this would be like a quick tip that I would highly suggest you implement ASAP, is 1 day a week have a consistent connection time to talk task management, to talk house, to talk bigger vision. For us, we typically do that on Mondays, like Monday mornings. So on our calendar, every Monday morning, there's this rolling appointment and it's a calendar invite and it sits there solid. And I tell people if you can't do that because of like schedules, then do it on the weekend. Like do it over coffee in the morning where you are literally sitting there going, what is the bigger picture? It is a weekly check-in. And when we started and I introduced this to you, what was your reaction?
I bucked it pretty hard. It was it was something that I really didn't want to take part of at first
Why?
because I didn't know. It wasn't there was kind of a fear of the unknown and kind of what's the fucking point? Pardon my
Okay.
language.
So you got defensive. And when you get defensive, what happens?
I shut down. I just avoid completely.
Okay. And so how does that so if I'm like, "Hey, is there anything that I could have said or did differently that would get you to not shut down?"
I think it just depends upon, for me, it's kind of what's in it for me. What's the features, advantages,
Hmm.
and maybe benefits for me?
Okay.
I didn't see it when we first
Okay.
started this.
Okay. So we're getting a lot of questions of like, how do you structure it? How do you make this routine if there's shift work, blah, blah, blah. So you have to I always like to tell women, because I primarily work with women, okay? And I say this with so much love. You are the red flag. It is very, very easy to use somebody else as the reason why we cannot accomplish something in our lives. I like to create, I'm like super woo, I'm super spiritual, I'm super like can be in the feels, but I also like to take radical responsibility and I desire peace and freedom. I desire ease. I desire like less chaos. I desire abundance. So, in that moment, if there's friction, if there's like, we need to have this conversation and it's not happening, I have learned, and I've seen some of you say, like, I just give up because there's resistance or he's defensive or they're defensive. So I just give up. I will be relentless with, like, this needs to happen. Not like, obviously, it's going to make his life easier too, right? But I will be like, when are we having that conversation? When are we having that conversation? And when we have that conversation, sometimes the first week, like it's there, it's like, did you get my calendar invite? Just confirming this is happening on Tuesday this week because of our schedules, blah, blah, blah. But the persistence, and when they give defensiveness, when they give you pushback, just understand that's emotional pushback in the sense that they're trying to, you get to keep what you defend. And so they're defending, their brain is literally going, uh-oh, change is occurring. And so they're going to react any way that they react. Once you get to the meeting, once you get, and I'm using air quotes, meeting, once you get there, it doesn't mean that everything needs to be fixed in one conversation. Day one conversation, you may be going, hey, let's just sit here and have a conversation about what's working and what's not working. So before we can even go, what's the structure? Let's stop trying to like framework everything in life, and let's just say step one is having that conversation consistently. That is the structure, is creating space on your calendar and holding that other person accountable to getting there. Then I'll talk about like how we kind of like keep track and stuff like that.
Can I step back for a second?
Yeah.
In the comments, someone asked, "My hubs keeps forgetting, and I just give up." There's a powerful thing that you said when you were talking about that is you don't want the chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, that's something that she communicates. I don't want to live in chaos. I want to live a calm. So having that sold to me or told to me is there's an advantage and a feature here that, hey, we can calm down some of this chaos if we communicate that to the other and say this eventually will help calm our lives down. That type of talk is something that makes a difference to us, right? What's in it for me? Calm,
Yeah.
being less reactive.
Well, this reminds me of like sales skills. So, like in our business program, like our primary focus is helping you lead and communicate in alignment with how you want to feel. And this is a sales skill, like selling you on the idea of having this weekly connection. And you have to understand what is the value that the other person, like, what do they want and desire? And I don't even know how long it's been. And we have a whole bunch of other questions. So if you have questions, please put it in here. And I'm just talking about like the basics of like a weekly touch point. So how long have we been doing this meeting? Like it's not perfect all the time.
A few years.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a story. I remember it was either last summer or the summer before we would have this meeting and you were gone a lot like in the summer and we weren't having the meeting. And I could feel my anger and resentment building because it was like we both knew you were going to be gone, but no one took responsibility for when it was going to happen. And I got angry and resentful because I'm like, why the fuck? That's my go-to story is why the fuck does it always need to be me? Like, why does it always need to be me? I need to be the responsible one to move this needle if it's going to happen. And I remember one time I just said, this is important to me. Let's make it happen. And we did it on Zoom virtually.
Yeah, we did. I remember that.
And it wasn't a super productive meeting because I was mad and you kind of just showed up and you were like, well, I'm here. Like, and I was like, I don't want to have this conversation now because I'm frustrated. But I feel like that was a little bit of a turning point. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And what did that do for you? That's a boundary. When I held that boundary, I used my voice and I was like, hey, this is consistent. But I remember feeling that resentment in myself going, Heather, if you want this to stop, you have to say something. You have to hold the boundary because it wasn't just about having the meeting. It was like, let's get shit off of our plate so we can continue to move on. But I was getting frustrated that I needed to be the needle mover.
That reinforced exactly how important to you it was. Like
Mhm.
it helped me realize and understand that this is a no shit for real thing that really does matter. And it does move the bar. We talk about, everything burning from finances to activities of the week to
Yeah.
business. Like we have a ton of different conversations and it's not really structured. It's just what's the hot shit that we need to get off our minds.
Okay. Now, your children can be around for this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Our kids are around all the time for it.
A lot of people will be like, the house needs to be quiet, needs to be perfect. Da, da, da. I don't know what it is culturally with this perfectionism of people being like, well, the kids need to be gone or they need to be sleeping or this or this. I actually think it's really, really good to have these conversations in front of your children.
I think specifically with this kind of conversation, it teaches kids what a good relationship is like,
Right.
but it also how to run a healthy household.
Yeah. And if that's not your current situation and there's a lot of anger or frustration, then yes, maybe you can't have it like with the whole family there. But I think from what you're hearing me say is make it a priority and own it. And you have to accept as an individual, like I can only talk about my bubble and what I have control over. You have to accept that if you are unwilling to take ownership for something where you are now angry and frustrated and resentful, then you have to be able to own that you hold that resentment. You can't project that onto somebody else later when you didn't take responsibility for owning it. And I think that's the big thing I like to help people with is you need to own how you want to feel. So after we've had the conversation, and again, we're just talking about the meeting here, what we do is we have our calendar invite, and in the description of the calendar invite, it will say Heather and it will say Bryan. And based on that week, we'll write down kind of what your focus is. So for some of you, it may be something very tangible, like I'm going to go do XYZ. But it's like, what are we focused on that week? Or even just meeting notes, like in general, what did we talk about? So I hear this a lot, and I saw this. Someone's like, my partner forgets. Great. Forgetting is a coping strategy. Forgetting is your literal brain trying to keep you safe. And when we kind of fall victim to other people's coping strategies, like the little coping strategies, we're like, well, he forgets. Great. So, what does he need to be held accountable? And that's okay. I forget things too. My brain literally forgets to keep me safe. Bryan's brain forgets to keep him safe. So, my point here is it's normal for these things. Like someone else is saying, my husband's looking for problems before they occur. Again, great. That's okay. Like, just because somebody else's brain is hardwired for something doesn't mean it can't change or shift. You have to ask yourself, are you willing to grow? Is that okay with you? And if it is, then stay the same. And if it's not, then shift. I see this all the time, even with our boys. Go ahead.
Okay, so important kind of to talk on that very quickly. One thing that these conversations meetings are not, it's not a bitch fest.
Right.
She's not, so if we're talking about finances and she realizes that I spent $780 on coffee in the last week, she's not screaming at me and making me feel judged for this. We're just having a conversation. Yes, this happened, matter of factly,
Hmm.
and not attacking the other person for it. That's very important because men, specifically me, will shut down or get extremely defensive with that type of a feeling.
Hmm.
I think that's important to note.
Yeah. And I think we're all it's the consistency, it's behavior change and pattern interrupt. So in the description, we'll put like, what are we focused on? And then again, the magic happens in consistency. And so it's the next week or the week after you're having that touch point. How did that go? What did you do? What didn't you do? The gaps start to communicate or start to show where your growth opportunities are. So where you get to show up and be like, okay, you said this was going to get done. It didn't get done. You forgot or it just you didn't prioritize it. A-okay. So I always say, great. So if you can't get this done, who's going to get this done? How are we going to make this happen? Because I don't want to get this done. I don't have the capacity for it. It doesn't matter what happens in that conversation. I would say the priorities are you get it on the calendar, you have it consistently. It's just a touch point. It makes you look at your shit. You kind of figure out what's priority for you. At the beginning, we were kind of doing, crisis management, survival state problems. Now, because we've been doing it for so long, we get to talk about next level vision. We get to talk about like, what do we want things to look like? And sometimes I am now being held accountable to that appointment. So the shoe is kind of on the other foot sometimes.
It's kind of, I kind of look at it like a house on fire type of thing. Eventually, the fire gets under control and it simmers down, and it's less urgent and more kind of thinking outwardly. And we're kind of at that point where it's become less on fire and more,
Hmm.
I want to say, building.
Yes. Yeah. Any other questions that you have just in general? But the one thing I want to talk about now, if you don't, is men and anger. So I live in a household with lots of boys. Uh, we talked about this. I told you what to prep for this morning. So even if you're on the podcast called Emotionally Uncomfortable. There was one time in particular, but we'll see if this comes up in this conversation. I hear this a lot from women that I work with about partners and anger. And I am curious about your perspective. We need a good still shot of your side eye of me when you just constantly giving me side eye. Um, of anger. Like describe it to me because I'm going to give you my perspective as a woman and but just talk about men and anger.
It comes up quick. And oftentimes we don't know. I don't know that I'm yelling, angry. It's 0 to 100 fast.
Mhm.
And oftentimes Heather is the one that tells me to go for a walk, or she's like the great, what I'm going to call interrupter of the process. Cause usually it's not me screaming at her. Maybe a dog, just saying. But she's usually the first one to tell me to go for a walk when she sees that I'm in that red zone.
Yeah. So there's something called red, green, yellow zones. Zones of regulation. And so green equals good. Like you're like, right now we're in a green zone. Yellow is when you're triggered, and red is when you are having like your explosive moment. We're not going to go into like the brain and stuff, but in your red zone, you cannot solve problems in the red zone. So if a child is in the red zone, any human is in the red zone, like you can tell they're frustrated. You are most likely reacting. And I'm talking about other people and not us when we're in our own red zone, but like you cannot solve problems in the red zone. Typically, someone's explosive and you're saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? You cannot do that. You need to separate and return back to the conversation. So I often hear too, people go from I am going, or this individual goes from green to red. There is no yellow zone. There's always a yellow zone. We are just not paying attention because we're not living in the yellow. We are either good or we are not good. And so when your life is so chaotic or so fast paced, this is where the tools come in. This is where energetic time management comes in. And this is why you need to learn to reverse engineer how you want to feel in all areas of your life. Because if you don't, you live a very reactionary life and you can't even get out of survival state, or you can't get to that thrival state. So I'm going to talk about a moment and as a boundary, an emotional boundary that I needed to hold.
This might answer that question.
Okay, how do you pull him out of it without making the take a walk suggestion even more triggering? Well, I would just like to say, how do you pull him out of it indicates that you are trying to rescue someone from their emotional state. You can't pull anyone out of anything. Even think about the water. I mean, you could pull somebody out in a state of like survival, like pull them out, rescue them in a crisis state. But essentially, what you're doing is you're throwing them a life raft, and it's their responsibility to grab onto the life raft. So I don't pull anybody out of an emotional state. So write that down. I don't pull my kids out of an emotional state. I don't pull Bryan out of an emotional state. I say, I see you're having a moment or you're experiencing something. Let's talk about this later. If my children are in a uh, danger, like dangerous moment, and my little mama bear is active and now being triggered, I will say, get the fuck out of here. Get out. And I get very protective. I get very big mama bear and I will be like, there's one moment in particular. I remember we were going to breakfast. You probably don't even remember this. You remember which one I'm talking about?
Not particularly.
Okay. So when the boys were little, I mean, kids are triggering. They trigger you, right? So I remember, I don't remember if it was like a morning, it was like a Sunday thing, but you went from like green to red and you were yelling, something happened in the house. And I remember getting very reactive. And I just said, you're not going to talk to my children like this. Like it was, I probably gut punched you, like below the belt. And I just left the house with the kids. But I remember having a moment where I'm like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to feel like this in my home. And there was a whole season where I just had to hold a standard. I had to hold a boundary. He probably doesn't even know what the hell I'm talking about right now, right?
No, but I do believe talking with boundaries, you do teach people how to treat you. And in that moment, you're saying, no, this is not acceptable. Even though I was probably angry about something stupid, that boundary was like there's a cement wall there and I cannot pass that. And that's really important to know for future that this is not okay.
But also going back to the importance of like the weekly meeting in the moment of the red zone when you're like, I'm scared. A lot of people be like, I just freeze. I don't do anything. I just freeze. And I'm like, that's okay too. But you have to come back to it. And so if you just walk away in that moment and you're like, wow, that's not the way I should have reacted. I should have said something else. If you're stewing on it, it's important to you and you need to revisit it. And so I just remember going to you multiple times and saying, something needs to change. I can't live like this anymore. And it wasn't that anything was good or bad. It was just new skills were needed. There's nothing more triggering than raising a family. There's nothing more triggering than being in relationship together. Bryan and I now work together. We are together almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it is a lot of energy to be together all the time. I will tell you that if I negotiate my standards with myself on how I let people treat me, that is when I lose. That is when I become resentful, and vice versa.
I agree 100% with that. I couldn't have said it any better.
How has your relationship to emotion and anger changed over the years?
Just being able to say that I'm approaching a red zone and the topic dies at that moment and we walk away and revisit it afterwards really, really helps.
Mhm.
Um, and approaching it with a calmer mind very often does solve the problem.
Two things that I want to say about this is you also hold really strong boundaries with me. And you would say, because people ask you this all the time. Every time we're with other people, they're like, how do you deal with blah, blah, blah? What are some boundaries that you hold with me?
I have to slow you down.
Okay.
Heather is a ready fire aim type person and I'm a slow burn and I like to slow her down a little bit because if we didn't if I didn't, I feel like we'd have 65 dogs and yeah, anyway. Um, but it's important to kind of know the other person and the other person's mindset so that you can reel them back in.
Mhm. And I will say, I don't think you slow me down. You probably keep me more grounded. But when it's really important to me, I'll give you pushback. So you reflect back to me, like if you're like, example, he's joking but not joking about this dog thing. And I just think, okay, the kids are getting older. There's this nurture in me. Like I want to save, and I think it is in my vision board to have a farm with three-legged dogs. And he thinks I'm kidding, but he's not, but I'm not. And
I don't think they know how real this conversation actually is. We
so
actually have this conversation.
my point is if it's important to me, he's like, make it happen. This is what needs to happen in order to make it happen. And I'm like, Heather, if this is something that you really, really want, make it happen. My point of all of this is when you reflect back to me and say, like, we can't do that, or da 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 da, I don't just abandon the desire. And I'm putting, like, I'm joking about this, but I don't abandon the desire. I say, okay, if Bryan is a slow burn and I got a 6 month running timeline, then I need to, it's water on a rock for 6 whole months. And then we'll get there. We'll get there. It's a 6 month lead time. Um,
She's not joking.
but I think it's accepting who you are at your core and not abandoning it to please other people
But also the importance of actually communicating that.
and co creating.
Yeah.
Also, if you are here and you are seeing, because Jessica on my team is posting this in the chat, you can go to heatherchauvin.com/audit. And if you use the code FAST action, FAST action, you can get the audit for $497. And I'm going to tell you what this is. I attract a lot of professional women raising children, whether you are in corporate, a leader, you are an entrepreneur, business owner in some capacity, and you want to feel alive and aligned. Like that is 100% what I help people with. You want to feel deeply connected in your relationships. You want to buy back your energy. You want to feel like you're using your time, your one precious life, to reverse engineer how you want to feel. This isn't just like a quick 3 step process and there you go. But the beautiful thing about the audit is I've created an AI little bot where it is my brain, and we have you fill out a form and we input all of that data, and it shows you your energy leaks. It shows you your time leaks, and it also shows you what you need to start doing and what you need to stop doing. That alone is worth every penny, but we will also have a one-on-one conversation with you for the nuance of it. So oftentimes when people come to me, they're like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I bought this program, I joined this mastermind, I've been in therapy, I do this, I do this, I do this. And it's like getting to the root, but also helping you see the invisible. I see a lot of people going, I need more structure, I need more frameworks, I need more strategy. And I'm like, I'm going to be radically honest. Most of what I see where it comes to energy leaks, because there's 4 types of energy, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, energy management is more of an identity challenge. And when you are not stepping up and into who you want to be and how you want to feel, you continue these patterns and you leak this energy. And then you try to patch those energy like gaps or leaks with things that are not going to support you. And so inside the audit, what we do is we support you in helping you get super crystal clear on where your leaks are, where you need to focus, and it's going to be the best money you have ever spent. And so, whether you're coming in because you're having a relationship fracture or breakdown, whether it's a health fracture or breakdown, a career fracture, all of the things, we can help you kind of get clear on exactly where you need to focus. Because once you have that clarity in your focus, the next step is implementation. This is not about acquiring more information. So people will kind of be like, I know what I need. If you intellectually, like from your neck up, understand what you need to do, but you're not doing it, that should be an indicator to you that this is not a lack of information. This is now implementation. And that is what coaching is about. That's where we support you in implementation and transformation. So people in their comfort zone will go and acquire more information and be like, it's not working, it's not working. It's because you don't have an implementation problem, you have an integration problem. So we'll show you exactly, like we give you a whole report in the audit to show you very clearly where you need to focus first. Okay. Bryan, visionary. So we have been together for almost 20 years. When I met Bryan, I was a single mother. I came into our relationship with a son who's a year and a half old. And I was living in my mother's basement on government assistance, going to school, all the things, like living in a survival state, almost crisis state. Fast track, we start dating, two more kids. I get cancer. We're like all the things. We've almost declared bankruptcy. We've been through the highs and the lows. Every single time I am about to have an up level in my life, you hear about it because I am always deeply afraid I'm going to lose you. Always. Now I'm like, you're going to die on me one day. Before it was, if I do this thing, if I make this investment, or if I become this person that I so deeply want to be, I'm going to leave you behind. I would love to know if I am alone in this belief or fear, because I hear this from women all the time. The reason why we obsess over other people's behavior and not take ownership for the action that we need to take is often because we are deeply afraid that if we become who we most desire to be, we are going to leave other people behind. Yes, I feel it all the time. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, great. So here's what I would like to say. When I, like, let's just pull back the curtains. When I step up and into that next level vision, what does that do? Like, as a male, what are you actually thinking?
That's a very hard question.
Or what have you gone through? Like when you've watched me do that?
Someone mentions the guilt in there. I can't see the name, but they talk about the guilt. So I see you feeling guilty for wanting to be better. And a lot of it is just you vomiting,
Projecting my insecurities or fears. Yeah.
and that doesn't phase me. Like that doesn't fizz me in the least. I want that to happen. I want you to become better. I want you to keep climbing that ladder and doing the shit that lights you up, because ultimately that makes you feel better.
Did you always feel that way? Did it ever at any point trigger any insecurities for you of like, if she does this, I'm going to lose her?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't. I didn't ever feel that you were gonna grow up in GTFO.
Mhm.
I didn't feel like you were gonna leave me ever or outgrow me for some reason. I guess maybe that was just one track mind.
Yeah. I do think in some partnerships that may not be the case where there is like a deeply insecure partner and trying to hold back that other person. but I like to use guilt all the time to keep me safe. I like to use it like I'm just like, oh, my children. So many people like when they go back to school, then they're in school and then we busy ourselves with other things, right? So, or when they're a certain age, blah, blah, blah. The reality is we're going to use emotional states to keep ourselves safe. And you don't have to be doing this for 8 hours a day. It could just be tiny, tiny actions, little standards that you hold. But every time I'm about to up level, I am always afraid I'm going to lose somebody. I'm going to lose, oh, we'll read that in a second. I'm going to lose a connection with my kids. I'm going to lose a connection with you. But I will tell you, and I say this to people all the time, as a woman, single or not, doesn't matter who you're in a relationship with, you are the culture creator. You are the keystone of the ecosystem. And when you are not healthy and you are not thriving, it literally taints the whole culture. Like you are the culture creator of your environment. And it's annoying. And I had to get to a personal place of leadership of like, I need to take ownership for this, but I really wanted to use you as a scapegoat. I really wanted to use you as the reason why I couldn't thrive. And I do remember it was when you were still working your 9 to 5 job, which was like a 7 to 7 job. Not, I don't even know why people call it a 9 to 5. It was a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. job. And I was starting to create freedom, like I was creating location freedom. And I was like, okay, I want to travel with the kids more. And your job is the only thing holding us back. And I just remember having this moment with myself where I was like, and this was post cancer. I'm like, I have one precious life. I am no longer willing to abandon parts of myself to keep you comfortable and to keep you comfortable in your job and not take the risk to leave because you did want to leave. Here's my point. You need to have really uncomfortable conversations if you want to live a life of freedom.
So during all of that, I wanted to interrupt you, but I didn't.
Okay.
Um, I look at this as partnership, right? Partner number one, like the rising tide raises all ships, right? So she's getting better, and that gives me the opportunity to grow with that. It's not one person's going to grow through the ceiling and then the other one's going to be on the bottom. No, I get better when you get better. Uh, and that's kind of the way that I've always looked at that.
I don't think you've always embodied that.
Maybe not, but I mean, it is truly a partnership.
Yeah. And I like to focus on behavior instead of words. When you take leadership and ownership about how you want to feel, you will see that people will rise or they will fall away. And you have to get to a point where you ask yourself, am I okay being in the exact same place a year from now? And if the answer is no, then you have to shift your behavior. And if you just shift it slightly, your whole life can head in the other direction. So we're almost at the top of the hour. So we will have to wrap this up. So I want to know, what is your biggest aha from this conversation and what do you have to say?
I just looking at someone's comment about their stories and their roles,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I think females specifically really need to learn to give up, because females specifically see their role as I have to be the primary child
Yeah.
care person, and that may not be the case. If you're better at being out there and making money or providing or whatever, you should be able to have that conversation with your spouse and saying, you know what, I'm better at this. You
Mm.
can tackle this or divide these roles because it's not 1950 anymore.
Yeah. Yep. And there's always the inner world of what we're experiencing. And I talk a lot about this of like, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? And it's so easy that when we are not in alignment, to blame something external as to why we're feeling that way. And that's not to say that we're not affected by the external world, but it's also to look inward and go, I have control over this. Like I have the ability to make a decision that may be a disruptor, that may like trigger other people, and that's okay. But it's not all or nothing. It's not overnight. It's like one tiny, tiny micro decision. And I've seen this again and again and again and again when I take the lead, of course, with like, I'm not just, reckless. Sometimes I am, but like sometimes, usually I'm not. Usually, we're having conversation about this and you're like, yeah, you do you, go for it. I watch and observe how everyone follows, whether they don't like it or not. Like they're going to be defensive. They're not going to like it. And that's okay. They don't need to change their behavior. One thing I've really leaned off with you is how you lead. I'm like, you do you, and I'll do me. And then we come together as a partnership. I'm not right. You're not.
There's also there's also a track record, right? So your track record is a follow through. So if you're a person that kind of jumps half in it on these things and your partner doesn't buy in, maybe it's because you don't have that track record of following through with things.
Yes.
So when Heather says she's going to do stuff, she does stuff. So I know that I have that faith that she's going to, if there's an investment of X or Y, she says she's going to do it, she's going to follow through.
Mhm.
And I think that's important to note as well.
Yeah. And we've had seasons in relation, like periods where like, we're like super, super close and connected. And then somewhere we're more like disconnected. And it's that like inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale. And I think the consistency of like, yeah, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not great, but we know we're there. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. So thank you for anyone who's here who wants perspective. You want to dive into this one on one. The first thing we actually really, really like to do is that audit. I see time and energy as the currency and the vision that you want of where you want to go in your life, both personally and professionally, whether it's relationships, health, alignment, or whether it's actual tangible things and you're just too close and you can't see it, you can go to heatherchauvin.com/audit. And it's just a form that you fill out. And we take all that data and then we're going to run the report for you on like where to focus, like where to lean in more, where to lean out more. It's going to give you big perspective because what I see is all these little silos of people focusing here and here and here and here. But the whole reason why you're doing what you're doing is because there's a feeling that you're after. You want freedom. You think more money is going to buy you freedom. And then you get the money and you're like, oh shit, that wasn't actually it. And so we talk about the energy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Where do you need to focus? What needs to happen? And we'll also do a one-on-one with you to really support you in the becoming journey of that. Yeah.
Don't forget the code fast action.
Oh, yeah. If you use fast action, you will get a discount. A discount. Fast action. heatherchauvin.com/audit. Thanks, everybody. And head on over to my Instagram. That sounded really old. Go to the DMs on Instagram. Let me know your biggest takeaway. Chat soon.